We are students of the art of play,
And we do this show called The Art of Play.
a show for the players who ask why.
I'm Vi.
And I'm Gaia.
Hey Gaia, what's our topic for today?
So today we're going to be continuing our trend of moving away from the psychology of video games and into the reality of video games a little bit.
The nuts and bolts.
The nuts and bolts, how the sausage is made. And we're going to be talking about game consoles.
Yeah.
So the main idea for today is, well, we've talked a lot about this game design principle, that game design principle, depth versus complexity, music, storytelling. We haven't really hit at the core of how we physically play games.
Yeah, what the medium is that we play the game with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think we've talked before a little bit about controllers and how we interact with our games and a little bit about VR, but today it's all about the consoles. The Switches, the Xbox Series X, I think it's called, the PS5s, the consoles with normal naming schemes.
Yeah. What's your favorite console at the moment? Or historically?
So I think my favorite console right now is the boring choice of like the Nintendo Switch, but there's been some fun ones out there. I remember there was a Nintendo console that was monochrome, but they chose the dark color to be red.
Ooh, fun.
And then they released a Wario game on it, and that's about it.
That's deeply entertaining.
And I think that's my favorite little bit of lore. What is your console historically?
Okay,
your favorite
well,
console?
Historically, man, me and that Nintendo DS were hip. Like, me and my pink Nintendo
True,
DS
based.
were so... Yeah, I think I played everything. Every game that I had and my brother had got put through that DS like 2 or 3 times.
Oh my god.
I love that thing. But
there was also the Virtual Boy, which wasn't that supposed to be like an AI to play games with you, but was also its own console and looked like a little robot dude.
this is totally news to me.
You don't know about the Virtual Boy, do
I
you?
don't know about the Virtual
I shall
Boy.
open its Wikipedia page as we talk.
Okay. I was gonna say that like these days, I think my Switch is I think it just hits the same like it hits the same buttons for me. You know, if you'll excuse the joke, that the DS does of just being like a little handheld guy.
So I did just find the Virtual Boy. It wasn't the AI thing. That was Rob. The Virtual Boy was a 32-bit tabletop portable video game console manufactured by Nintendo in 1995. And it was marketed as the first console capable of displaying stereoscopic 3D, which is the same one that movie theaters used of like the blue and red.
Yeah.
Right? And you used a head-mounted display, placing your head against the eyepiece to see a red monochrome display.
This sounds terrible.
This is the red console I mentioned.
This
Wario.
This sounds bad.
Yeah,
Yeah.
It was pretty bad. It used parallax to create depth, which that is too much for me to go into right now. And anyways, the console failed hardcore, and they canceled it a year later.
Well, yeah, it kind of sounds like you have to sit like a prawn to use it.
The game only had 22 games. The console only had 22 games released, and its display size was, and I quote, 384 by 224.
That's like this big.
That is tiny.
Yeah.
But also, that is concerningly specific.
Interesting.
Also, it never was released in Europe.
Okay, bold choice. So
All
it
game
was
consoles did
just
do that.
wait, hang on. So it was just like North America
And Japan.
and Japan, and that
That's
was it. Not Europe.
That's literally it.
That's kind of fun.
I love Nintendo for that. They used to do that all the time. Like, I remember, I think the NES came out in Europe after the SNES came out in North America.
That's kind of wicked, actually.
Europe was, like, deprived of video games. So, today we're talking about consoles.
Yeah.
We're going to kind of model this episode off of 3 primary questions that we're going to attempt to answer. Question 1, and probably the only one that's actually easy to answer, is what's a rough history of video game consoles? Excluding a lot of information, because oh my gosh.
We're just going to do a little timeline of like
Yeah.
some popular ones and what came before what.
And also everything we say in the timeline will be wrong in some way and have like 7 asterisks. We'll get to that. Question 2 is going to be, what's the major differences between various consoles? Why are there so many consoles in the first place, besides capitalism? Besides, the obvious. And the final question is, do consoles actually matter today? So Vi, when you think back to old consoles, like your first major console that you played, what was your very first that you can remember?
Oh, it was the Nintendo DS.
It was the
Nintendo DS, yeah.
Okay, since we've already talked about that, what was your second console?
The Nintendo Wii.
Why are you boring?
Okay, in the house, we also had a PS1.
Okay.
So, if we're going in order of, when things were made. Yeah. If we're going for, when things were made versus when I played them, the order that I played them in was, Nintendo DS, PS1, Wii.
Okay, so your second console wasn't even the Wii then.
Well, that I didn't play a lot on the PS1. It was there. I played some stuff on it occasionally. I don't think I ever, finished a game. But, I played games all the way through on the Nintendo consoles.
That makes sense. Suddenly that answers a lot of questions that I've had in our gaming discussions.
Wow, that's kind of rude.
For example, why does every episode talk about Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild?
It's because me and Nintendo go way back.
Okay. So thinking about that as your first console, now, in your opinion, or as far as you know, what is the first console? What is the first gaming console when you think about it, just assuming that you don't have any access to my notes for today's episode?
I assume there's some prototype stuff that kind of crashed.
Oh yeah, of
course. The one that I imagine would be the first popular one was probably the NES, right?
That would be the third generation of consoles.
Really?
Not even the third console.
That's crazy.
The third generation of
consoles. What was before that?
So before that would be the Atari 2600.
Hang on. Are we including arcade?
No, Atari 2600 was the first ever home console.
Oh.
And Pong came before that. Pong was sold as its own console.
Okay, that's crazy. Stop. No, Pong exists on old computers. It's not a thing on its own. Can you imagine getting just hi, I've bought a box. You know what the box has on it?
Pong.
Well, that's it. You connect it to your TV, that's what it does.
That actually leads into a very good discussion. So gaming consoles are split into probably 9 generations. I say probably because this is the first asterisk of today's episode.
Yeah.
According to Wikipedia, it's 9 generations. According to most textbooks, it's 9 generations. According to people who study this for a living, it goes as low as 4 and goes much higher than 9.
Yeah.
So we're going to use the Wikipedia standard for today's episode.
Sure.
Mostly because I don't have the mental energy to go read those textbooks.
The fact that there's textbooks on it, I know there should be, but whoa, guys.
It's wild to me that you can say history of game consoles.
Can you imagine taking that as a class? I'd sign up so quick.
Honestly, that'd be great.
When you're a prof, can you just pitch it? It's I want to do history.
We do have a game design course that's led by someone who does do a whole history section in it.
Man, I can't change my whole degree again. I'm almost done this one.
You could probably take the course. It's taught by Scott Bateman. He's great. I love that guy.
That's great. Shout out to Scott Bateman.
Shout out to Scott Bateman, who is someone I'm going to try to get on the show, actually.
Oh, sick. Hey, Scott Bateman, if you're listening.
If you're listening, we have a chair for you.
Yeah,
it's right
there
right
next
here. To Vi. So let's talk about the 9 generations. And we're going to kind of go into a little bit of details as to what you could expect from the generation. And in each one, we're going to take a moment to say, what would the gaming world have looked like at this time? And have a bit of a discussion on it. So the very first gaming generation, huge asterisk, most people consider this the start. Some people say this is pre-gaming gaming. So huge just asterisk there. Pre-gaming gaming is a thing. Is the generation between the years of 1972 and 1980. So let's consider we are pre-80s at the moment.
Okay.
And this would be Pong.
Is that it?
No, there were more consoles.
Okay.
The first major console was called the Magnavox Odyssey, which was released in North America, meaning the first ever home console actually came out in North America. And I don't actually know that much about it. It has its own Wikipedia page, and it has a lot of details in there.
It's got a sick name.
Oh, sorry. It had table tennis on it, which was just a different version of Pong.
Well, yeah.
And it ran on CRTs, as probably makes sense. And it was a big white box.
Great. So it was
like a vertical box.
It was just Pong.
Yeah, it was just Pong.
It's just Pong.
And then the second major console was called the Pingatronic, which
also rules.
And then was Pong.
Pong.
And the Pingatronic actually was the best selling in this era, apparently.
Over Pong?
Oh, no. It was the color TV game that sold best, which was the first ever console made by Nintendo.
There they are.
And it was made in Japan. And it was orange. That's all the details I've actually managed to collect from it.
Fun.
But the unique about this gaming generation is this was pre-cartridges, meaning every single circuit board that was produced had to have the game baked into it.
Right.
And the console just ran the game. That's what it was built
This is why
for.
you got Pong the console.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
you had to have a custom circuit board for every game.
Oh, that's bonkers.
Most game cartridges do have a circuit board in them that
Yeah.
runs it. But imagine having a whole console dedicated to Pong.
I mean, to be fair, you've seen photos of like supercomputers that have like 8 megabytes, right?
Yes.
Like this is like pre-80s, like tech is just big.
Yeah, tech
Yeah.
is just large.
Yeah.
This leads us to our second generation, which would begin 4 years later in 1976. Now, some consoles from the first generation are post 1976, which makes this more confusing. But remember, generations overlap. So we're
Yeah.
talking about a sudden jump in technology is how we define a new generation,
Sure.
okay?
Okay.
So the first major jump in technology would be moving from custom circuit boards to cartridge-based design, where you can put a game into your console,
Yep.
then take it out and put a new one in.
Yeah.
Now, we still kind of suffered in this because that was the Atari 2600. There were more consoles in this time. One of them was called the Fairchild Channel F.
God,
apparently.
that rules. All of these early game consoles have the best names.
Actually, my favorite one from this is the Mattel Intellivision.
That's lame.
I like Intellivision. I like Intellivision a lot.
The fact that it's the Mattel Intellivision is rough.
Okay, that's fair. But Mattel was a big company at the time, let's be fair.
I think it's for
Still
me,
is.
it's the alliteration of the EL sound.
It is, yeah. But this generation was defined by 8-bit CPUs and gaming cartridges.
Right.
Now, you might know of some games from this generation, such as the near entire death of the gaming industry itself with the E.T. game. Have you ever heard of this?
No.
So there was a game that came out on the Atari 2600 called E.T., based on the movie.
Yeah.
And it was so bad that the early nascent video game market
Yeah.
nearly collapsed around
Nice.
it.
Imagine making a game so bad you collapse a whole industry.
Well, you might have never heard of an Atari console after that. And most people didn't either. They did actually release more consoles in the third generation, but mainly stopped making consoles after the 2600 because they nearly collapsed the entire industry.
Oh. Well,
It's a lot. It's a lot.
don't make games about weird aliens, I guess.
The other issues was the Atari console was monochrome, but the game developers could choose the color. So there was white, and then there was a color. The console could render, from
One.
what I know. It may have been able to do two, one for the player and one not, and most players were either cubes or collections of weird characters, and that's about it.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm picturing Atari games and they were just sort of collections of squares.
Yep. I mean,
Yeah.
most things are collections of squares, but they
but
really
yeah,
were
I
collections of
understand how a
squares.
pixel works, but like yeah.
So
Yeah, really just like blocks.
this generation would end in 1992. So this generation went from 76 to 92, which when you think 92, you don't think Atari 2600, but it
No.
was supported for a while.
Yeah.
And now we get Nintendo. So Generation 3 is categorized by the major boom in home entertainment systems.
Right.
So graphics that are visible, multiple colors on screen. We're still doing the 8-bit CPU and video game cartridges, but now we're actually seeing some quality come out of it.
Right.
This is also where you would see the Sega Master System and Mario.
Hell yeah.
This would be, from what I know, this is this would be like pre-Sonic, but it's still like the third generation is like really when gaming took off.
Yeah, because isn't Sonic the like Sega's response to Mario?
Yes.
Yeah. So he's later.
Yeah. So from 1983 to 2003 would be the last console supported ending its lifetime. You would see like the original Mario games and a lot of like the growth of early Nintendo. Now we're still pre-Pokemon, pre-Mario Kart, like a lot of the games that really show off consoles today, but we're really at a point where a game is a game and not Pong or E.T.
Yeah, we're starting to get story elements and like you progress through levels of things.
Yeah, so you're starting to get dungeon crawlers. You're seeing the first growth in major game design concepts. A lot of the music went from random collections of sounds to multi-track songs.
Yeah, like Pong just does the little like noise when you hit things, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
And
now you've got a soundtrack.
Yeah, so the Atari 2600 did have sound, but it was closer to screeching than it was sound, to be quite honest. And then you have Mario, which everybody knows Mario, which
Yeah.
I can't sing here without serious problems. But also Legend of Zelda and other major game systems.
Yeah.
Or game Games, yeah.
Games.
Of course. The fourth generation would begin 4 years later in 1987. And we're starting to reach the point where game generations really overlap because a company would release a console that's definitely third generation in terms of tech. At the same time, another company releases a major leap in the technology, creating the fourth generation. And so then you have both of them at the same time from two different generations released at the same time.
Right.
It's become a massive problem, which is why we use technological advancement. But the fourth generation, starting in 1987 and ending in 2004, so ending almost the exact same time as the third generation, would be known for the Sega Genesis, the SNES, or SNES, if you say it that way. People keep making that face at me, but I've always said SNES.
No.
NES and SNES.
No.
Anyways, so this was known for being both 8-bit and 16-bit in its time, and it also had cartridges as well. But it was really the emergence of 16-bit, multiple color palettes, Sonic, really just Sonic is the big thing.
Yeah.
I know Nintendo released a lot of amazing games. I think Earthbound came out at this time. A lot of the progresses in the Legend of Zelda series. Some of the best 2D games ever released would come out in this time period. But come on, it's Sonic. This is also where you would get consoles like the, apparently the Turbo Graphics.
Again, just
It's
such a good
cool
name.
As well as the Neo Geo, which will come back to our
Yeah,
story
why do I
regularly.
want like a GeoForce graphic card? No, screw that. Give me Turbo Graphics.
So this generation was also known for a few other things. The beginning of the handheld console world. Now, the third generation did have handheld consoles during the time of the NES. We did see some playable by hand consoles, a lot of those really cheap and bad ones, but the Game Boy would come out during the fourth generation. Now, handheld consoles do have their own generation scheme, and I spent like an hour trying to figure it out.
Yeah, and I imagine they don't match one to
There's
one
no
with the
timeline.
Yeah.
There is no timeline. It like not even they don't line up with the console timeline. They don't have a timeline. The technology was all over the place. You never knew what someone was going to release. The
Right.
only thing that we can be certain of is here's when Nintendo released consoles, here's when Sony released consoles, and nothing else is worth looking at. I'm sorry, Sega, your handheld console didn't matter.
Yeah.
That's it. So we move on to Generation 5, which would begin in 1993. Now, this is where gaming became big. This would be the first major boom after the times of the NES, the SNES, and those consoles. And this would be, first of all, the Sega Saturn, which if you know what that is, I'm sorry. You shouldn't. The Sega Saturn was a failure, and it is what ended. That plus a few other things is what ended Sega's ability to make consoles.
Yeah.
But you would probably know this generation for the N64 and the PlayStation. So here we're really talking about 32-bit games and the emergence of 64-bit games, which, now that's a jump.
Yeah, yeah. This is where we start to see some really big, like,
Yeah.
much more powerful than we've ever seen before.
Big names are coming
Yeah.
out here, right? A lot of the classics, like the Jak and Daxter series on PlayStation would come out. We would see Mario Kart. We would see Mario Party, which would, I think... Now, I know Mario Party did begin on the NES, but, like, the 64 games were good, man. Like, the 64 games were good, right? We would see the rise of optical discs as our way of storing data. It was generally believed that Nintendo was failing by not using optical discs when the PlayStation did. This would also be the one-day fallout between Sega and Nintendo that would create the PlayStation in the first place.
I'm sorry, the one day fallout?
So
They just disagreed for one day and PlayStation was like,
yeah, around this time would be the beginning of major game conferences and game events.
Sure.
Like basically E3. I think this was pre-E3, but still, like this is when gaming was really huge in the market now.
Yeah.
And Nintendo was getting ready to announce its new console, and it announced a deal of what it was doing with Sony to make a disc-based system. And the next day, they announced a falling out between the companies, and Sega would move on to making its own console, which would later become the PlayStation, and Nintendo would not move into the optical disc market yet. Just a wild story, I know. Now, there was a handheld console at this time as well that's worth noting, and it's called the Sega Nomad, and that's all that's worth noting about it.
ooh, yeah, I have heard about this one, but
How?
yeah.
I haven't.
No. Here's the thing. It's like it's one of those ones that we mention a lot of the time when we talk about like handheld gaming consoles. Be like, yeah,
Right.
And the Nomad, and I just again, it's the name that sticks. It's like, yeah, I've heard about that one.
You know what? Fair enough. I
Yep.
had not. 1998 would bring about the sixth generation, which I just want to say we haven't hit the 2000s yet, and we're 6 generations in.
Yeah.
Yeah. This would be the final Sega console, which I think was the Dreamcast at this point in time, but also the PlayStation 2, the first major failure from Nintendo, the GameCube, and the Xbox, the original Xbox, which, fun fact that I learned about it, its logo is shaped after bread.
I'm sorry, did you say
Sourdough bread.
why?
Because have you seen the cut in sourdough bread like an X?
Yeah.
The original designer of the Xbox was obsessed with bread, and he still posts videos and posts online about how much he loves bread.
Okay, next time I buy a console, it's gonna be an Xbox just for bread
Just for
lore.
bread.
Bread lore.
Love that guy. No, he's great. He's still like I've seen so much about him. And
Man, that's so good.
fun little fact. He managed to get some ancient yeast from ancient Egypt and keep it perfectly sterilized to make a piece like a full loaf of bread from pure ancient Egyptian yeast and eat actual ancient Egyptian bread.
That rules.
That is so cool.
Can I tell you that one of the things on my like list of stuff that I have to do is there is a purple stew in Europe that's been like, I mean, it's a perpetual stew.
Yes.
It's been cooking for like
Forever.
300, 400 years. I need to go eat some of it. I'm required to. I'm doing a version of perpetual stew, which is just like freezing some broth from every stew that I make and adding it back into the next one, which is like, hey, it works. It's cool. It's fun.
That's pretty cool.
Makes me feel good. I do want to eat the 400-year-old soup.
Okay, so
Sorry, let me just derail the whole thing here.
So
me and the Xbox bread man, we see eye to eye on this.
So the sixth generation was also known for the point in which game consoles caught up to personal computers in terms of strength.
Okay, I was gonna ask you about this because I was like, we're now hitting the point where like Mac and Microsoft are starting to like do things. So at what point do these things like collide?
So computers were always stronger than game consoles up until this point. They were more capable, could run more things, had better processors. The advent of graphics cards would actually be on computers long before consoles. But around this point, game consoles did catch up. Prior to this, it was kind of seen as game consoles were dedicated game machines and personal computers were generalist machines that could run games if they wanted. But like computers were expensive back then. We're talking thousands for something that would be worse than a game console.
It's usually like the game console is developed on a computer.
Yes.
Right? Like you have to have a progression in computers before you can jump to a progression in consoles.
Yes.
Yeah.
But because game consoles were dedicated game machines and were way more affordable, they would take off for their game purposes. But here they catch up, which was a weird moment in history to say game consoles are now better than computers, where they're made and designed.
Cool.
Just a weird thing that happened around the sixth generation. Now, we could keep going about the sixth generation, but what you might also notice here is most of the small companies that we had mentioned up until this point are just gone. The Neo Geo, the Atari games, all of the Pongs and weird things, and Sega.
Yeah. Your independent one-offs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There would be handhelds in the sixth generation. In particular, you might know the Game Boy Advance. I see you like hyping up for the DS.
No, I'm
not
just
yet.
waiting for
We're
the
almost
DS.
there. We're almost there. There was another handheld console at the time called the N-Gage, like N-Gage. I see a picture of it here. And apparently it was also a mobile phone, and it was made by Nokia.
I don't like it.
Anyways, on to the seventh generation. The seventh generation would be the one to kick in the 2000s, beginning in 2005, so a bit late, but the first of the 2000s. And it was known for three consoles that everyone here should know well.
Yeah, this is my era of gaming.
This is
here.
where most people listening probably really got in. And this is where, if the N64 is where gaming became mainstream, and the PlayStation 1 is when gaming really found its audience, this is when gaming exploded as a medium, when it began to surpass other industries.
Now, I think we should probably say for our listeners who don't know us personally, I was born in like the early 2000s.
I was born like in 2000 in January.
Yeah.
So this would be the Xbox 360, the PS3, and the Wii.
Man, you know how many people I knew who had the Xbox 360?
Which is wild because it sold 40 million less than the Wii.
Yeah, no, I knew like I think every household that I would go to for friends, like get-togethers or whatever, had a Wii.
Yes.
Second console that I saw most was the Xbox 360.
Yeah.
It was like every household had the Wii, but then if there was like an older boy in the household,
360.
there was a 360.
And you know what's wild? The 360 sold worse than the PS3.
Yeah.
By about 3 million units. Which is
I mean,
that's not a lot.
That doesn't seem like a big number when you're talking about consoles.
Yeah. Well, the Xbox 360 would sell about 84.7 million, and the PS3 would sell 87.4 million.
I don't know. Those still feel really similar to me when you're talking about like 80 million units.
They are very similar. But the 360 still sold less, which is wild that it was the worst performing. Then there's the Wii.
Do you think that it was a... I don't remember the price points of either of those.
So, in general, some discussion for this is really that the 360 and the PlayStation 3 just constantly competed with each other and were fighting tooth and nail. So they ended up equaling out in many ways. Okay. And then there's the Wii with 101 million units sold.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
That's a lot.
This would also be
It's also the worst of them. Like when you're talking about like the kinds of games that they run, Wii is like
performance.
Yeah, I know. That's what I mean. Yeah, it's
we
just
will definitely get to that.
Yeah, but that's bonkers to me. It's like, you want to play Mario Kart? Yeah, the Wii's gonna do it. You want to
yeah. In terms of handhelds, this is where you can pop off, because the major handheld of the time and one of the most successful consoles in human history would be the Nintendo DS.
Yeah, man.
And the PSP came out around here as well. It sold half as many units as the DS. I'm not even kidding. The DS sold 154 million units.
Every kid that I went to school with had a Nintendo DS.
Yes.
Yeah.
The eighth.
This is the Pokemon era.
This is the Pokemon era.
Yeah.
This really is, even though Pokemon began on the Game Boy.
Yeah, but this is the Pokemon era. Off. Yeah, this is the popularity. Yeah.
The 8th generation will begin in 2012 with the kickoff. I think the Wii U kicked off the 8th generation. Yes, it did. And we would see in 2014 the PlayStation 4 and the Xbox One. There's not much to say about this except that this generation is ongoing because the PlayStation 4 is still supported.
Right.
And more importantly, the 8th generation includes the Nintendo Switch.
Well, yeah.
So, remember before how I talked about we define generations by big jumps in technology? Like the N64 brought in 64-bit, and I kind of skipped over that for the last ones, but the GameCube and PS2 brought in online connections and graphics cards, and the PS3 and 360 brought in digital distribution. Well, this one brought in not much in terms of major jumps, and weirdly enough, it brought in the point where Nintendo desynced from the release schedule and would release a console much sooner than what was expected of them, releasing their next console in 2017 when the two other major players would release theirs in 2020, 8 years later. So what ends up happening is the Switch was a major jump from the Wii U, but was not a major jump from the PS4. And so the Switch is included here.
Yeah.
This would also be the time of the PS Vita and the 3DS. I put N64 in my notes by mistake. This would be the 3DS at this time period. And this would also be the death of handheld consoles. Because it's around here where mobile phones became gaming consoles. And the DS, with its cheaper line of lower performance games, couldn't compete against a computer that everyone had in their pockets.
Right. This is the Candy Crush era.
This is the Candy Crush era.
Very good.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Anyways, the final generation and the 9th generation would be right now, from 2020 to now. And so far, it's only the Xbox Series X/S. I don't like their naming scheme. This is horrible. I have so far said Xbox, Xbox 360, Xbox One, and Xbox Series X. Yeah. It's horrible, but also the PS5. But
I will say thank you, PlayStation, for just going
1, 2, 3, 4,
1,
5.
2, 3, 4, and good. It's excellent.
And other than this, we would also see some weird consoles. So around generation 8-ish, around like the 2010s.
We're talking about like PC gaming, like becoming a handheld thing.
So PC gaming was dying off around the 7th generation, around GameCube, around the PS3, Xbox 360, Wii. Those consoles destroyed PC gaming. It was seen as no longer viable. It was believed that PC gaming would completely die off. And then in 2012, Steam took off. Out of nowhere, Steam became one of the most major players and defined gaming as much as Nintendo did. And we see in the current generation, Steam has made its own handheld console, which is like a mini PC called the Steam Deck. Also, ROG, like Asus, also made one called the ROG Ally. And I don't know, I don't have any opinions on it. It's white, I guess, and shiny.
It's pretty.
It's pretty.
Yeah.
I like the Steam Deck more. But
I mean, I'm really quickly going to look at photos of both of them. Just give me 1 second and I'll give you the only opinion you need.
Sure. Well, you look it up. I'll cover the next little bit.
Okay, wicked.
There's many systems of assigning generations, and I covered one of them here, but multiple people have said that Gen 1 was Atari and everything before that was pre-generations, or some say the Atari all the way up to the NES was one generation and everything else was like, Gen 2 and beyond. The only real consensus actually begins in like 1999, where everyone says that some generation begins in either 1999 or 2000, with it being the 6th gen or the 4th gen or the 5th gen, just that something began there and every system lines up past that point. So past 1999, most systems agree. Pre-1999, I just picked the one that made most sense to me.
Fair enough. My hot take, based on looks alone, I don't have any specs. I just have a Google image search of the two consoles.
The ROG Ally is pretty sweet.
The Ally is prettier.
It is.
Yeah.
But the Steam Deck is just better in general. It's because it's better integrated.
You heard it here first, folks. If you're looking to buy one of these, get the Stream Deck.
Exactly.
Well, I'm sure you didn't hear it here first. That's just
definitely not here
definitely
first.
not
if you
here
were
first.
looking at them, you probably already knew about which one was better. So that covers most of the history. But there's something fun about the history that I actually want to talk about. And that's the fact that there has never been a generation where the best console in terms of performance did the best in terms of sales.
Yeah, and my opinion on this is that doesn't surprise me even a little bit.
Not at all.
Not at all. Like I'm thinking of the people who buy like handheld consoles, right?
Yes.
Like, okay, if you're looking at price points and you're an adult buying something for your kid, you're going to be like, what? I don't know. What makes games good and doesn't cost a whole bunch of money?
Yeah.
Okay, here you go. Have a Nintendo DS.
Yeah.
Like,
versus a PSP that costs twice as much with games costing twice as much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Have you met kids? They go through games so fast.
Let's think about some of the console wars historically. The PS3 was better than the 360. Although the software in the PS3 was so hard to use that most games that came out on the PS3 were worse because the programmers didn't know how to program for it because it was like arcane magic. And then the Wii destroyed both of them.
Yeah.
The Wii destroyed both of them.
It's there's an ease of use. I think this again is like, in my opinion, like Mac versus Windows, there's an ease of use like user interface.
Yeah.
Which makes Mac more successful in some ways than Windows devices.
Yeah. And then you remember Windows has 85% of the market share.
Yeah.
Which is a lot.
A lot.
But also, let's think about like currently with the Switch. Now, the Switch began in 2017, so its sales will always be higher than the Series X or the PS5. But I checked yearly sales for these consoles.
Sure.
And the Switch's worst year was its first year in 2017. Neither of the other consoles in the 3 years of their activity have surpassed the first year of the Switch, except for the PS5, which barely edged out over its first year in the most successful year in the PS5's history so far.
Yeah.
The Switch is destroying the console market.
I think the Switch like really hits a good niche though. Like and when it came out meant that there were units available when the pandemic hit. And so for people who weren't big into gaming before, you know, wasn't a lot of money, you can play it portably and you can use it as a home console, right? You can plug it into your TV. I think that's like selection of things, you know, you're going to win.
Yeah.
Right?
So let me ask you a question, Vi. If the big difference between consoles, you would think would be performance, its ability to play games. You'd think that's the biggest difference. But we've just said that it's not, that usually that the cheapest console tends to win. So there has to be something else that defines games besides just cost. Because if it was just cost, the rule of cheapest wins would always be true. And that's historically not true. The Wii U did very bad despite being, I think, cheaper than the Xbox One at that point, which was the dominant console.
Right.
So what else differs between gaming consoles?
Well, I think it depends on like what games are available and popular. I think that's got to be huge, right?
Yeah.
You want the thing that everybody else is playing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For example, what games are, let's say, exclusive only to Nintendo?
Like almost all Nintendo games. Anything that Nintendo makes. Like any Pokemon, Legend of Zelda,
Weirdly enough,
Mario?
Splatoon, Mario.
Yeah, Splatoon. Yeah,
I love
why is
Splatoon.
Splatoon only available for Nintendo?
Well, it's made by Nintendo. It's a first-party game.
Well, sure. Answer the good answer.
Weird.
Yeah.
There other differences do exist between consoles, such as how they define their controllers. Do they have motion controls? Wink, wink. Future episode.
Yeah.
Right. But also, like, how do you play the console? The Switch moves around. The GameCube had a handle to carry it to your friend's house. I'm not kidding. It had a handle.
Yeah.
The controllers for the Wii were sticks rather than handheld proper controllers.
Yeah.
Right? I keep talking about Nintendo for these examples.
I think also a lot of it is like how the game looks and feels.
Nintendo games tend to be stylized.
Yeah, I think they're also like based on my remembering of like childhood gaming consoles. Like if I had a friend who like opened up a game on the Xbox 360, it was like dark and like kind of gritty, and I think it's just because they were all playing Halo.
They were all so dark. It was Halo. It was just Halo. I've been playing Halo recently. It's just Halo.
Okay,
and Call of Duty.
But also but Call of Duty, like they're all kind of first-person shooter-esque like
action
games that are just kind of gritty. This is why all the boys
Round shooters is what they were usually called.
Yeah, this is why all the boys had those consoles, and everybody who was cool had the Wii
and
because
then
they
also
were like
have
fun.
the Wii with like Just Dance.
Yeah.
Which the Xbox 360 would later actually win in terms of Just Dance with the Kinect, which, again, motion controls, we'll get to that topic.
Yeah, but the Wii had it kind of first before motion controls.
Way before.
And and you had a game you could play with like up to 4 people.
Also, you didn't need to buy an extra device.
No.
You could just pull out a Wii mode.
Yeah, it's just the same.
But you're right that the big difference between consoles often came down to what games could you play. Let's take a look at the Xbox 360. Just to name a few, the exclusives on the Xbox 360 included Banjo-Kazooie, Star Wars Battlefront 2, the entire Halo series, Quake 4, Saints Row, Tomb Raider Legends, Gears of War, Final Fantasy 9.
All the Tomb Raider games rule.
They're really good.
Yeah.
Elder Scrolls Oblivion was PC and Xbox only, right? Call of Duty 2 and 3, Battlefield 2, and Gears of War 3. These were most of these are shooters and weird gritty games, and when they weren't shooters, they were still gritty. Looking at you, Tomb Raider, Gears of War, Call of Duty, Gears of War, like all of it. And the PS3 had Devil May Cry 4, some Final Fantasy game. I actually couldn't find the number quickly. I think it was Final Fantasy 12, which means, yes, Final Fantasy 9 was exclusive to Xbox, and Final Fantasy 12 was exclusive to PlayStation. Square Enix was playing both teams. They also had Metal Gear Solid 4, Tekken, Uncharted, Yakuza 3, God of War 3, not Gears of War, God of War. That confused me when I did my research. And Ni no Kuni, which if you know Ni no Kuni, I love you.
These are all also pretty gritty.
Except Ni no Kuni, which was made by Studio Ghibli.
Yeah, well.
Besides that one game, they're all gritty. Everyone's gritty.
I'm sorry, I'm looking at your list right now. That's why I'm not talking. It's like every single one of these games is like gritty, sort of first-person shooter. Yeah.
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 And what about exclusive games today? Now, a big thing about today, remember how I said the PC market has reemerged? Xbox has begun transitioning to PC markets. So every game on the Xbox is available on PC through the Windows Game Store, and every PC game on the Windows Game Store can, to some degree, be played on Xbox, at least mostly. Sure. So it's integrated. And this means the Steam Deck, which I think has connections to the Windows Game Store, can also play Xbox games. Just basically Nintendo and Sony are just kind of ignoring everyone else.
Yeah.
And even Sony is starting to budge on this. But some exclusives today are like on Xbox, we would see like Forza Motorsport, which has always been exclusive. Elder Scrolls 6, that'll be the only console it comes to. That's also coming to PC. Outer Worlds 2, which is we're still waiting on, and Microsoft Flight Simulator, which again they're all on PC. We see on the Switch everything. That's what my notes say. Everything.
Yeah. Every
Nintendo game, Switch only. Although Nintendo is also starting to budge on this rule, slowly. They might be bringing some games to PC. And PS5 has the most exclusives with Demon's Souls, Ratchet & Clank, the Final Fantasy VII remake. Kind of. That also is coming to PC, and I'm so excited. As well as, you know what? I was searching up exclusive games on the PS5, and I found a list of like 30 games, and 28 of them were remakes. Look, we have a whole different episode we could do on why remakes are dominating the market right now.
Yeah.
And I'm very excited for that episode because I have a lot to say about it. But it's mostly remakes.
I've got to say, is that just a nostalgia thing?
It's a cost-saving thing.
Oh. Yeah,
and yes, nostalgia. So, in reality, a lot of game consoles were defined by their exclusives and by their cost.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, if a console had Halo and you wanted to play Halo, you got an Xbox.
Yeah.
If you wanted to play Devil May Cry, you got a PlayStation.
Yeah.
If you wanted to play Mario, you got Nintendo. And if you wanted to play, I don't know, Age of Empires, you got a PC.
Yeah.
Which, huge fan of Age of Empires, by the way. That and Civ and all my RTS games, PC.
Yep.
Games that required a mouse, PC. And that's usually what defined your decisions. Not how good was the console, but what games will I play?
Yeah.
And we're seeing the death of exclusives as a concept today, right?
Yeah.
Most games come to PC. Most games will get ported to other consoles. Even Elder Scrolls is available on the Switch now.
Yeah.
for some reason.
Well, and you were saying earlier that part of the reason that consoles always do kind of bad out of the gate is because they make up their money in exclusive games later.
Yeah.
Right?
So
like
that's a
they
little fun
lose money
fact.
on the console, but then gain it back when people buy games that are console exclusive.
Yeah.
Exclusive.
I don't even think I actually said that in the episode yet. So just to drop it in here as well.
Wild.
In general, most game consoles lose money on their first release. They make their money back from long-term releases when the production lines get smooth, or on games exclusives, on selling first-party and third-party games and making their money back that way. Game consoles are expensive, and this is also why game consoles dominated the market in the past, because they were, being sold at a loss. So they were cheaper. And so you picked the cheaper of the cheap options.
Yeah, and that's where you...
And then there was PCs, which cost you thousands of dollars. And now today... it feels like Xbox costs you thousands of dollars.
Yeah.
So now people just go buy cheap, half-decent PCs, or a Steam Deck, or a Nintendo Switch. Your PC was not cheap, Vi. I see you pointing at yourself. Your PC was not cheap. I helped you pick that out.
That's fair. That's a good point.
Your PC was cheap in comparison to them back then, though.
Yeah, that was more the point I was making. And also, like, looking at them while the whole graphics card thing was going on. And then when I finally...
I fried my PC the week after the graphics card shortage began.
I'm so sorry. That's like crashing your truck right at the same time, too.
Yeah, it was bad. I had to go buy a laptop, and it was up like $200.
Yeah, that's rough. See, when I'm pointing at myself being like, yeah, they're so much cheaper, it's because when I was shopping for laptops, I was like, they're all so expensive. This is crazy. And then it stopped, and I was like, oh, that's a much better number.
But yeah, so I have a question for you, Vi. After everything we've said, do game consoles matter today? With the advent of PC, Steam, we haven't even touched much on Steam besides the fact that they just dominate the market now and are some monopoly that controls everything. Microsoft is porting its games over to PC. Cost has become a factor, and we've said that PCs are way more accessible than they ever have been. The concept of accessibility is important. We mentioned the domination of the mobile market, but not really. Mobile is actually the largest gaming market on Earth now, mobile phones.
Yeah, I really think that it depends. I mean, accessibility is huge. But I think it also depends on where the majority of people play their games.
Yeah.
Right? Like, during
Which turns out to be on their phone.
Yeah. Because it's always there, right? Yeah. That's the thing for me. Is like, where is it most accessible? The thing that I don't have to go dig out of a bag, right? Or don't have to go home to play, right? Which is your phone. Yeah. I think a console still matters in some ways. I think people really like the idea of like, I have one place where I do this, right? I go sit down and I play video games, and it's in this one space where nobody bothers me, and that's a thing that I get to do. I do it with my friends in the basement or whatever, right? And like, I don't think PC gaming quite has that yet, or that's not what I mean. I think
it doesn't serve that purpose.
It doesn't serve that purpose, and you can't take it with you, which I think is why the mobile, like I think that's why this like mobile gaming and like the Stream Deck and the Switch.
Yeah.
Like, are still consoles that exist that people buy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree. And the question of do consoles matter was a bit of me being a little bad faith with my question.
Yeah.
Because here's the actual answer from what I found. Do they matter? Well, they've always mattered. If people are buying their games and are buying consoles, then they matter. But what we are seeing is that their importance in the gaming industry is going down fast, and that the gaming industry is being dominated by accessible markets, mainly mobile phones and PC. We also see a very big domination from the Nintendo Switch, an accessible, affordable console that plays fun games and has its handheld mode. Historically speaking, people care about cost, accessibility, and the games library. And with game libraries being mostly the same across consoles now, it's cost and accessibility. And at the end of the day, it's whatever you have with you.
Yeah.
The accessible will be the phone, and the best libraries will still be on the PC. But the most exclusives are still Nintendo consoles, because Nintendo will not make their games unexclusive.
Well, and I think there is something to be said for like people who want like high quality things. There will always be a market for like the person who wants that really good, like the Xbox. No, I'm sorry, the Switch
Lite.
No, the other one with the better screen, the
OLED.
Yeah. Right? There's always going to be somebody who wants that like one step more. Like, yeah,
Fun
you
fact,
could get the Switch,
I didn't
but like
buy the OLED despite it being only $50 more because I wanted to buy Just Dance, which was $50. So I bought the original Switch so I could get Just Dance.
So you're just proving your point. It's all about what's available
accessibility
and the game library. Yeah.
Yep. I was like, I'm going to buy a Switch. And I saw the OLED and stood there for half an hour.
Hey, what do you
like in
think?
Walmart.
What do you think about the idea that they were going to do like a Switch Pro? Like they were going to do like a much better version of the Switch?
That's really what the
And
OLED
then-
is. It does have a better processor.
See, I thought that because of the graphics card shortage that they didn't do that. That they
That's
just
true.
went that
They
they
didn't-
just
they
went
didn't do a
better.
major Switch
Yeah,
Pro.
I thought they were going to do a major.
No. The
Upgrade.
Switch 2 is slated to come out next year.
That's kind of sick.
Maybe. They've already showed demos to people, and usually once demos come out, you're 1 year away. But, speculation. I can't confirm things. For those of you listening, who knows? Switch 2, probably third quarter of 2024 is my estimate, which would be like roughly just after the summer, but before Christmas.
That would be a good time to release a console.
Usually September is when consoles come out.
Yeah.
Usually enough for the hype to go up with the early release, and then
Yeah.
Christmas hits. But we'll see. I'm very excited for the Switch 2. But Vi, I have a quick gift for you.
You have a gift for me? That's
in
so
podcast
cool.
concepts.
Oh,
I have a
okay.
gift for you. So I talked a lot about a comparison between the various systems of organizing game generations, right?
Yes.
So I have the image that compares every system.
Oh my goodness, is this like a big web graph thing?
It is in your inbox right now.
Oh, let me see.
I want you to look at this mess of
Oh my
comparing
god,
systems.
this rules. I'm a sucker for any kind of like visual display of data.
Yeah. So Vi, based on this image, can you tell me? I'm gonna quiz you on this image as part of our, a little bit of
man.
fun we have. When did the first generation begin?
Okay.
We use the Wikipedia system, but I will
well-
accept anything you answer.
Okay. Hang on. The beginning of it is like 1973-ish. But you could also say that it started in
77.
yeah, 77, but you also kind of miss the end. Unfortunate. Yeah, I have that's the earliest date on this.
So
On
Vi,
this chart.
I want you to scroll near the end, around 1989 actually, and I want you to tell me where does the fourth, the purple's
Yeah.
the fourth. When does the fourth begin and end?
Okay. So for context, because listeners can't see this chart that I'm looking at, the fourth generation, based on like
One system.
there's like 10 judgments of these generations, like 10,
Yes.
10 options.
10 different systems for organizing the gaming generations, which I was
Yes.
talking about earlier.
Now, the fourth generation, the earliest date on this chart is like, gosh, let's call
89.
that 80. No, the earliest?
Oh, yes. The
No,
earliest,
the
is like
earliest date is
83
80
82, 83, 82 and a half.
I think you're bad at reading. The fourth generation?
Yeah. I'm looking at the bottom line. The
Yeah.
first one is, oh my god, it said 83.
80 yeah.
87 and
87.
a half. I'm so stupid.
Yeah, okay, so 87. But then in somebody else's reckoning, that generation begins in 1999. So it begins between those two dates.
One person says it ends at 92. The other person says it begins in 99.
Everybody agrees that it is done by at least 2005.
Yeah. My favorite is that everyone agrees that the sixth generation, except for two systems, everyone says the sixth generation was a PlayStation 2
Yeah.
and Dreamcast.
Yeah.
Not always the Dreamcast, actually. But PlayStation 2 was in the sixth generation, probably.
Yeah. The sixth generation, like in the early 2000s, we're all like, okay,
We understand.
we understand what consoles
Things
are supposed
make
to
sense
be.
now.
Yeah, and then before we talked about this, in my like sort of reasoning through when things came out, that's the bit that I lined up. Like I was like, I know what happens after the early 2000s,
Yeah,
right? There's
that's
this
when there
and
was
then
like
this
3
and then
companies
that.
left.
Yeah, everything before I was kind of like, I don't know. There's stuff. There's people figuring it out. Anyway.
This system's whack.
Very fun piece of lore is that when do generations begin and end?
Yeah. So for listeners who are curious, some of the ways of organizing consoles involve saying the earliest consoles weren't a generation as much as they were a mishmash of systems, but like the Atari kicked us off. So some of the systems start generation 1 when other systems are currently starting generation 2, which is why we have this fourth generation could be super early or super late split in the chart.
Yeah.
Generally speaking, sometimes when one says 5, then one above it says 4. Which they're agreeing on the start date. What they're not agreeing on is what number is it.
Yeah. Yeah, they're like, there is something here.
Yeah.
We're just
also,
not 100% sure which.
2 of the systems on this chart are from the same guy, which I think is even funnier. His name was Gretz. And he put them in the same book, from what I can read, because it's 2010 and 2010A.
Nice. So he was just like, here's options.
It's like, I think this. Actually, you know what? I don't think this.
Fair
Actually, no,
enough.
they were 2 separate papers in 2 separate economic journals. Just read that.
Different things.
Yeah. Weird guy. But
Based on that fact alone.
that fact alone.
Very
Weird
good.
guy.
Okay, but Xbox,
I really hope he
but
doesn't reach out
Xbox
to me
man
after
who, but Xbox man who names his console after bread.
Yes.
Totally stable. Not weird.
I love that little fact that the Xbox has a browser. I'm just like sitting on that fact.
Man, okay, if I ever designed consoles, I'd name mine after soup.
You'd name your console after soup? What
I'd
would you
name it
your
after
console?
Oh man.
Soup box.
Soup. this stew box.
The stew box.
Actually, I think brain box would kind of be a fun.
Brain box would be a fun name.
That's kind of cool. I'm copyright.
Considering how much we
Copyright
talked about.
2023.
But that's most of the history of consoles. And why did we go through all this trouble of talking about consoles?
Hey,
Because
Guy, where do you think consoles are going?
I think consoles are moving into specialist game machines still, right? I think that's going to be always a constant.
Yeah, you do your gaming on this box.
But they're also moving into generalized home entertainment systems.
Yes.
Like Netflix and movies and activities with your family and friends. I think home entertainment is really the direction consoles are going, and mini computer. But I also personally think consoles are a dying breed. I think a lot of them are going to move in the direction like the Switch of being like a handheld console / on-the-go gaming machine. So you can play your games with a full laptop or an amazing connection or internet, or, you know, like you want something small to play a game on that's better than what you can get on the Google Play Store.
Yeah.
But I think in the long term, we're going to be moving towards computers playing games, maybe, and mobile phones.
Yeah, something
And
like
that's it.
the backbone for your phone.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
I think that's the direction we're really going in, and that's all that we're going to have left. So, Vi, I'm going to pose this question to you, and I want the viewers to think about this one a bit as well.
The viewers.
Oh my gosh, the listeners. The listeners. I watch too much YouTube.
The people watching behind the glass.
Behind the glass.
Yes.
The entire station is dark. It's
Yeah.
just us.
It's just us and some lights.
So I do want to ask you and ask the listeners as well, why in our game design show did we just go through all this history of game consoles? What do you think?
Well, it's that piece about like games are released on specific consoles, right? You have to design the game for the console that you're going to be playing it on, right?
Picking your console is
Yep.
how you pick your audience in some ways.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, if you're going to release a gritty first-person shooter, you're not putting it on a Nintendo Switch. Oh my goodness. You're not going to put it on a Nintendo system.
Exactly.
You're going to take that right over to Xbox.
And I think throughout a lot of our episodes, we've talked about different game design concepts and just here's a good practice, here's a bad practice. But at no point did we say, does this practice work for this audience and why does it work for this audience? Or is there another situation that could be better for it? And I think it's important to think about games don't just exist as games beamed into our brains. We are playing games using methods of playing games in special locations, on special hardware with different controllers and different approaches. So knowing how we play the game is as important as how we make a game to be played. Because picking your console will choose a lot for you. Just imagine, like you have the 4 buttons on the top right of most controllers today. Even on Switch consoles, you have those 4 buttons now. Imagine trying to get those 4 buttons on a Wiimote. 2 in your left hand, 2 in your right hand on the nunchuck. Was that what it's called?
Nunchuck.
Nunchuck with
Also,
an N?
it was in your left hand. We remote in the right hand.
I'm
Nunchuck in the-
left-handed.
Oh, well. Okay, never mind.
That was a problem actually for me regularly.
Yeah.
But like accessing those buttons was a nightmare. Even though they were all in your hand at the same time, it's like accessing buttons was hard on the Nintendo Wii, right?
Yeah.
Like having to go like ABXY, like in a Mario Party game.
Yeah, it was not-
You just couldn't do that.
Yeah, no, because you had to
'Cause it'd be
move your
like-
whole hand down the thing.
I'm thinking about it. It would be the front of the long controller, back of the long controller, top of the nunchuck, back top of the nunchuck, then back to the front of the long controller. Like
Yes, but
I can't do that. I can't do that motion.
But if you were doing a point and click with like move the wand and then click the button, great. No other console's doing that though.
Mario
Yeah.
Galaxy.
Excellent.
That's it. Like just get the shine sprites. Is that what they're called? Shine sprites?
In Mario Galaxy?
The mini stars. Bits?
I don't remember.
Star bits?
Bits?
The little
It's gotta be
star
bits.
Probably.
That
Shine
sounds-
sprites was Mario Sunshine.
Yeah, Now I imagine that it was that it was bits.
I think it was bits, some form.
It feels like it should have been bits.
I think so.
Okay. But on that note,
that covers most of everything. We have to think about consoles because they define how we play our games. And because we care about our games, we need to care about more than just the games that we play, but also how we play them. We could do a whole episode on where people play games. Living room versus on a train versus on a plane versus like in school. Like what environment do people pick up their games in? And that's a huge topic. Like mobile games are assumed to be for 5-minute chunks when PC games usually plan for 2 hours. And the Switch is actually, in its design, most games on the Switch are designed for 30-minute chunks. A weird middle ground. And that's a whole thing we could do in a future episode. If you tune in later, you might even get to hear that episode of designing for play length. And yeah, I will steal material from Extra Credits again. Just for, as a bit of credit, they provided a lot of the research I did for this episode. As always, love those guys. Go check out their channel on YouTube, Extra Credits. They do great game analysis, and they always have. Perfect designers talking about this stuff. But we're not designers, we're players.
Yeah.
And our understanding of games will be different. And that's something important too.
Yeah.
So I think that covers everything I had. Any comments from you, Vi?
No.
All right. Well, I've been Gaia.
I've been Vi.
And we'll see you next time. And that's it for today's episode. But what if you wanted to listen to more? Well, our new episodes come out every Thursday at 9 p.m. Atlantic, and there are 3 different ways that you can listen. If you're in the Fredericton area of New Brunswick, Canada, you can listen live on CHSR 97.9 FM through any of your radio services. If you're not in this region or you prefer using the internet, you can tune in on chsrfm.ca at the same time, 9 p.m. Atlantic. As well, we release all of our episodes on a number of podcasting platforms online, including Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and more. So if you wanted to, you could go back right now and listen to Season 1, where Vi and I do a deep dive into the fundamental concepts of game design, rather than the hardware they'll be taking up this season. Anyways, thank you for listening, and have a good one.